Greetings and welcome to this issue of Hillcrest Video Wine Notes. This is the fourth in this season's tasting, and we're super excited to bring you some wines that we don't do very often. There's two of these wines that we've only done once before, but we're going to start off with Yes, It's Back, the Bull's Blood 2017. We're going to move to our international selection that is a wine from a very special place that I would guess to say most of you have never had a wine from. Maybe you've heard of it. And then we're going to finish up with a beautiful crisp white, second release of a white that we did just a few years ago that's going to become part of our stable. So we'll get started. Back for the second vintage is our Bull's Blood, and many of you remember Gabor Palatai, who's a dear friend who I had the opportunity to visit Hungary with in 2009, and we traveled around Hungary and actually visited 8 different wine regions, 3 or 4 wineries a day. And one of those areas is an area called Eger in northeastern Hungary, probably the most famous area for red wines, and that's where the famous Bull's Blood comes from. When I returned in 2009, I was just really beginning to experiment with the concept of aging wine in older cooperage for extended periods of time. And you know, today in Oregon, most reds are probably average about 10 months. If you look at the wines of Napa Valley, like Cabernet, maybe 18 months. But it used to be many of the great wines of the world, like Chianti Reserva, Rioja Reserva, by law were aged 4 years minimum in barrel or big barrique, really, not barrel at that point, and then 1 year in bottle before you could use that appellation on that bottle. And so when I came back in 2009, I began experimenting with neutral barrels and aged for, I think it was for 3 years initially, the Bull's Blood. This is the 2017 release, so this is the second time I've taken a crack at this. The goal being Bull's Blood is really a signature wine for a winery out of Eger in Hungary. And so this is a blend. It's Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Syrah, but this wine has had a lot of time to kind of marry together, harmonize, and develop a lot of complexities of those 3 varieties. This wine was aged 4 years, yes, I said 4 years, in the big Bodhi we have, 5,000 liter or 1,300 gallon oak casks, which are becoming more and more predominant once again in Europe as they return. 4 years in that, 2 years in a stainless steel tank, and then 1 year in bottle. 2017, I just released this about 3 weeks ago at the Greatest of the Grape. And by the way, it happened to take Best Red Umpqua Valley. So super beautiful wine, but this is very indicative of the wines that would have been consumed in Europe a couple hundred years ago, where people lived, even if you had a lot of money, if you were nobility in that, you still lived a very rustic life. So the finest fabrics were highly prized in that. The great wines of Bordeaux were consumed, what was called claret, coming after the French word for clear, that you could see through the wine in the glass, where dark wines were considered kind of coarse. Today we've kind of flipped that a little bit. We live a very easy existence compared to a couple hundred years ago, of course, and we tend to worship power, much more intensity. This wine speaks to a different time and a different place, but 2017 Bull's Blood. It has a color to it that it's got like a ruby red in the center, but on the edge is beautiful brick brown, and that's very indicative of wines with a little bit of age on them, either from bottle or barrel. But we'll take it for a spin. As I always talk about, you can smell this wine. You know, beautiful wines actually come out of the glass. They kind of greet you, and I pick up the smell 5-6 inches even from the glass. There's a beautiful, like, cherry fruit, almost, I talk about this like balsam character. This wine has a lot of that character. It's kind of like a Hillcrest fingerprint. I'm not sure where it comes from, but it's something I see in a lot of our wines. But beautiful kind of leathery component like dried rose petal. Beautiful sweet fruit. Leather. When I talk about this in wines, oftentimes you'll see one thing and it'll evolve into the next and evolve into the following. This is really, it's harmonized. It's all one kind of in the same. I'm getting like some tea notes almost right now. But very, very fine tannins. The tannins are there, but a super elegant, extremely long wine. Now, this is some very, very great fruit off of a vineyard that we have up, many of you would know, as the Misty Oaks Vineyard, just due west of Sutherland. So this is one of the wines that came off those varieties, but super, super beautiful. Anyway, that's an exciting thing to drink, and I'm glad to return that. I know many of you are fans of bull's blood, so as I say, it's back. So next, I'd like to pour you something. I'll give you a little hint. So this is we talk about Old World wines, which is what the International Club is about, Old World Reds. This is Old World. It's an area that was first planted, we know, in about 780 BC by the Phoenicians. It's high elevation, limestone soils, an area that a lot of French moved into. It had grown wine for several millennia, 3 millennia, but it's an area the French moved into in a pretty big way in the 1850s, 1860s. There are about 40 wineries there now. There's one that's very, very famous. It's seen around the world, a lot of great wine lists. That place that is from is the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. So, we like to kind of turn rocks over and see things. This is 50-year-old Carignan vine. So Carignan is the base of Perfecti and Poboleda, but here we see Carignan in a really kind of very tough environment in terms of the struggle of vine that makes extremely beautiful wine. So this is old vine, Carignan, fermented in concrete and then aged in concrete for 2 years. So anyway, I'm going to visit it again here. Beautiful, like crimson plum, kind of. There's certain plums you bite into. Santa Rosa plum can be like that when it's not quite ripe. You bite into it, you get this kind of beautiful, bright, fresh, almost sour kind of character to it in the nose in a beautiful way. Much kind of sweeter, especially after the bull's blood. The youthful fruit shows a lot more tannins. Once again, the tannins are there, but the tannins are. Carignan can have a tannin that's interesting. It's a little bit between like Cabernet Sauvignon tannin that we'd say are big but soft, and like Petite Syrah that's kind of chunky, chewy. Carignan's kind of in the middle there, and this has that little bit of phenolic character, but it's very kind of sweet, smooth, but much more kind of broad. When you grow grapes, once again, in warmer areas, you tend to see more sweetness, softness, and roundness, and we would expect that to be this way versus like the bull's blood is more elegant, kind of what you see in a lot of French wines in the north, and that kind of come across the palate and open up gently and close down gently. But beautiful, a little bit kind of chunky. Actually, that wine I think about like with lamb would be so fantastic. It's got that little bit of structure to kind of combat the richness in that, but that wine carries quite a bit of weight and power in a pretty gentle way. To finish up with, the Bianco 2023. So we did Bianco a few years ago, and it's a style of wine I really like. It's the base grape for this is Pinot Blanc. That's one of the truly great grapes of the world that is really, it's not appreciated. Within the wine business, oftentimes, Pinot Gris is an interesting grape a couple places in the world that makes very, I say, serviceable wines, rarely exciting. Pinot Blanc is the opposite. Pinot Blanc can do stunning wines in Austria, Germany, northern Italy, France, Oregon. The problem is it doesn't get any respect. We say it's a Rodney Dangerfield of white grapes. And so it's a grape variety that can have richness and weight, but it has that acidity in it, and it cuts. Oregon had quite a bit of it planted at one time, when Pinot Gris was first being planted, and for whatever reason the market decided that it would go to Pinot Gris, and Pinot Blanc to a great extent was kind of closed off by the wine trade, but it actually makes very, very exciting wine. So this is something that's made in the northern Italian style, which means Germanic influence, picking it a little bit earlier, higher acid to make something that's very, very crisp, what I call red wine drinkers white wine. So people that drink, or cultures that drink a lot of red wine, don't want rich, heavy, weighted white wines. They tend to want white wines and rosés that are very focused and bright. Lemon zest, almost like a little key lime pie, but not sweet, super crazy, beautiful. You salivate. Certain wines you smell, especially beautiful high acid whites, you salivate in anticipation of tasting them. Very, very gentle in the palate. I get a little bit of almost like an herbaceous, like a rosemary kind of character, which I've never had before on this, which is really beautiful. It's a very kind of perfumey character that's kind of fading away now, but super bright, fresh. If it was a red one, I'd call it Garrigue. There's that character sometimes in Rhone varieties. You see, it's the smell of the like lavender, rosemary that grows in the Rhone Valley. It almost has like a hint of that. Maybe it's just right now, or not even maybe rosemary flower kind of thing. It's got this beautiful kind of perfume. So with that, we'd like to say thank you again for supporting our family's dream and mission in life, and to the genie in the bottle. Cheers.